challenging for you?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Just give me one of these if you, no, give me one of these if you can't hear me. I'll talk loud enough.
No,
You feel?
I'm fine.
You're fine.
I can adjust my,
Oh, your hearing aids. Okay, good.
Awesome.
Well, are we online now? Okay.
We're live.
Hi everyone online, and hi everybody here. I'm Kim Blackwell. I'm the artistic director at Fourth Line Theatre. We're so thrilled to welcome you back in person for some of you, and we're doing it hybrid, so some of you are online, but this is our first in-person artist talk since April or May of 2019 with Justin Hiscox. So I'm thrilled you're all here. We're at Bagnani Hall, and so we have a partnership with Traill College at Trenton University, long, almost 20-year partnership that we're deepening quite a bit now. We're working with them on the new outdoor amphitheater. And Rob Winslow, who's our founder, has a long relationship with Trent as an instructor, and I went to Trent, and I don't know how many people in this room went to Trent, have an affiliation with Trent. Lindy is filming, yeah. So Alex and I are gonna chat. I'm gonna introduce him in a second. The first thing I just want to say is if you can turn off cell phones if you can, that would be great. I wanted to acknowledge two of our major sponsors, Nexicom, who is our season sponsor, and Mary Ellen McCamus Exit Realty Liftlock, who is our major sponsor. Thanks to both of them. I just wanted to also acknowledge that we are on an unceded territory. This is Treaty 20 territory, traditional territory of the Mississauga, and you're living in Winnipeg, so you're on Treaty 1 unceded territory, right? So it's the Dene and the Anishinaabe, and it's the Métis Nation, it's the founding of the Métis Nation. And this place where we are right now was a traditional portage between Chemung Lake and the Odanabe River, and so this is a place of travel for First Peoples, Indigenous peoples through the millennia, where we are now. And right now I'm thinking so much about the incredible Indigenous people who went to Rome and met with the Pope, and the active work that Indigenous people are doing around reconciliation. So I'm thinking about that, as well as thinking about clean drinking water for Indigenous nations, and access to equal education for Indigenous children who live in remote communities and Indigenous communities. So those are the things I'm thinking about today. And if you want to do anything and support Indigenous people and Indigenous struggles, of course the residential school, there's lots of charitable organizations working with residential school survivors that you can donate money to. Saying all of that, I now have this great pleasure of sitting for about an hour with, I guess, my colleague and my friend, Alex Poch-Goldin. So we'll start at the surface, which is Alex is the playwright of the first play we're going to do in our 2022 season. I almost said the 2020 season, because that's when it was supposed to be done. Alex is a longtime playwright at Fourth Line Theatre. He is, I think it's easy to say, second only to Robert in our most successful playwrights. Both of Alex's previous plays, The Right Road to Pontypool and the Battle of Bank Robbers, thank you, I was thinking The Great Shadow, were wildly successful sellouts, and we brought them back. And I think you're the only playwright besides Robert who that's ever happened with. Do you know that?
I certainly feel blessed to know it now.
So, I'm so thrilled to hear. I want to just say Alex was filming all night in Winnipeg on a fascinating new 6-part Canadian series. And then he flew, did you leave at 3 a.m.?
I had to be at the airport at 3 a.m.
So he has not slept. And then he got into Toronto and drove here. So
and then I drive back and go see a show in Toronto tonight. There's only so much theater going on in Winnipeg, and I wanted to see something in Toronto.
So Alex lives since July 2019 in Winnipeg. So you are a Montrealer, transplanted for decades to Toronto, and then you made a major life shift in 2019 and moved to Winnipeg. How is Winnipeg in the pandemic?
It's all right. We moved there just before the pandemic started. My ex-wife and I have a daughter, and my ex-wife, who's friends with me and that much with her, she got the artistic directorship of the Manitoba Theatre Centre. And so we all decided that we would move out there with her husband and just make a go of it. I'd worked in Winnipeg many times over the years, and I know they have a good, strong artistic community there and take part. And they also have what I didn't actually know at the time was a burgeoning film industry. And so there's lots of stuff that's happening and interesting stuff. The Porter was shot there. If anybody had a chance to watch that on CBC, it's on CBC Gem.
You were very good.
I had a great part in it, and an important story being told, and Winnipeg has great tax credits for that kind of thing. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening. It's a big shift because it's so much smaller center. People talk about the cultural support, and it's true, they have so much cultural support. Per capita, I think it far outshines Toronto, but it's just in terms of sheer volume, it's much smaller. They have fewer venues and fewer companies and less money to spend that way. But it's a great community, and I'm really happy to be part of it, and growing inside of it, writing and acting on stage, and acting in film and TV as well. So it's been quite wonderful.
So we could talk about your renowned acting career, but I wanted to focus more on your writing career. So I'm curious, so was this hotel that was at Passe Muraille in 2001? Is that possible? It's 21 years ago?
Yeah.
Is that your first play you wrote?
No. The first play I wrote was for the Quebec Drama Festival. It wasn't produced. It was a play it was called Day of Atonement, and it was about this fellow who wants to have sex with his girlfriend on Yom Kippur, and she denies him, and he ends up raping her.
Oy.
And then she leaves him, and that was kind of the story. It wasn't a particularly in-depth play. It wasn't produced, but I am selling copies after this meeting. So
Did you bring copies?
No, I did not. No. So that wasn't produced. The first, and then we did a show called Going, which was a kind of a clown show that we did. I had a company called Spend Your Rent Theater with my brother, and then I met Kelly, and she had a company called Banana Fish Company, and we merged together. We did a production called Going, which is that Brad was in.
Brad Brackenridge in the audience here.
Sir Brad Brackenridge was in it. In the original. And he was great in the show, and it was a clown show. It was like a 40-minute show, and we did it in the Fringe, and then it got remounted, and we did it at Buddies and Bad Times, and we're part of the Rain State season, which for a small independent company was so thrilling. To get a $1,000 grant from a Metro Hall in Toronto was so thrilling. You can't do shows on that kind of money, but you can do shows on a harp. We did them on harp. And so that's how we got the ball rolling. And then with this hotel, finally we got into the Fringe Festival one year. We didn't have a play, and we'd already spent the $400 to apply, so you have to come up with a play. And in those days, we were just like.
And Fringe is a lottery, right? So people throw their hat in sometimes without a production.
It wasn't a lottery.
Oh, it wasn't?
This is
okay.
This is the second or third Fringe Festival in Toronto. So it was early days, and you just had to apply, and you would be in. So we were in, and I ended up not knowing what to do. I was the writer of note, and Kelly was going to direct. So I ended up looking in journals. I used to keep a lot of journals. And wrote a lot of poetry and scenes and stuff like that, and I found a dream that I had, and the dream was basically I was walking in a bar looking for my girlfriend, and I couldn't find her, and then I found her at a table with some other people, and I wanted her to come, and we were going to go home. She just basically told me to get lost, and it was profound. The feeling that I had in the dream was profound, that rejection, and I used that as a basis for this play about this man who comes home and finds his wife with another man, and he takes a trip in his mind, and he travels to this hotel, which is a place inside his psyche, and he encounters all these other characters who have been hurt by love, by the love pain, but it's a little bit non-traditional.
It was trippy. I remember seeing it and thinking, it's trippy. That's my 21-year-ago sense.
It would take like tropes like the Tennessee Williams heroine and turn it sort of upside down, and it took ideas of what we perceive about love and kind of just put them through a surreal lens. Anyway, the show did extremely well in the Fringe Festival, and we really went whole hog. We built a set, and people didn't do that at the time. Because it was sort of like in a farcical structure. It had 5 doors that opened, the hotel doors, and people would go in and out, and there was all kinds of mayhem and magic that could happen under those circumstances. And so it got a lot of attention that way, and we got on the cover of Now magazine, and the show sold out, and Randy Hewson, who was a wonderful actor, was the star of the show, and he invited Robert Lepage to come see the show. He had worked with Robert Lepage, and Robert Lepage came, but he didn't have a ticket, and nobody told us that he was at the door, and they didn't know who he was, and they sent him away. So that's why the play hasn't been done all over the world at this time. But we're still keeping our fingers crossed. But we remounted that show. Canadian Stage was interested for a long time. They really dragged us out. They made promises to me. You're gonna have an office.
Canadian Stage, what's wrong with you?
Well, it was very frustrating because I was waiting, and it was like months after months after months, and then finally Peter Pasmarai and Lane Coleman came on board. Jacopo Knappen actually suggested that we talk to Lane. We did a reading for him. He loved the play. We put it up. It was the top selling show of 2001. And we got we didn't win any awards, but we got 6 door nominations for plays and actors and productions. It was a thrill, again, for an independent company. It made a difference and gave me a lot of confidence. And that summer, too, I had written another play called Jim and Shorty, which I had been gestating for a long time. And we did them back to back. We did the Fringe that year, and then the Summer Works, which is another festival similar, which was a jury festival. And again, the show did extremely well, and both shows ended up being remounted. And then I just started taking my writing more seriously and learning about it. I had worked with Jason Sherman, who's quite a well-known Canadian writer, and Brian Quirt, who's quite a well-known dramaturg who now runs the Banff Center. And we all did this play called The League of Nathans. And over the course of the development of that play, I learned a lot about dramaturgy and about playwriting and about communicating, and so just took all those tools and started to put them into my toolkit and use them to create new work.
And I would have met you at Canadian Stage. Were you in the playwrights unit? Because I knew you around your play Yardside, which was part of one of the festivals of readings at Canadian Stage.
Yeah, they would do 3 shows a year or something like that.
Yeah.
But that was after Angels in America, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, because I wasn't there, so Angels America was 96.
96.
Yeah. So I started in 2001, and Yardside was just after that. So that's how I would have first encountered you.
Yeah, I guess so. Yardside was this play that sort of inspired. I took an amalgam of my grandfather and my father, and so I could use my Jewish, Yiddish folklore and family history, and which a lot of storytelling inside of that culture, and told the story about this family that had basically moved from Montreal to Toronto because of the Parti Québécois coming to power, et cetera, et cetera. And at the time, the lead character's had a stroke, and his daughter is estranged from him, and his son is helping him, and there's family issues. His wife is dead, but he's been buying trees in Israel to honor his late wife as a memorial to her. But he hasn't told the son, and the son's giving him money for medicine, but really he's taking the medicine money and he's buying trees because he's guilty because he was a lousy husband and a lousy father, and he's trying to make amends for it. So at that time, he had a caregiver, and she was Mexican. We made her Mexican. I don't know why, because Chiapas was in the news a lot of the time, and I did. And then I ended up when this hotel got attention. John Kaplan had written about it in Plays International, and got the attention of this agent in Germany, and he contacted me, and he became my German writing agent, and tried to translate it. He got the play translated, and had a couple of my plays translated, but he couldn't get a production of any of those plays. But then I gave him this play Yardside, which is about this Jewish family, and they had already had great success touring a play called Visiting Mr. Green, which is about an older Jewish man and a younger man in their relationship. And they wanted this to be a follow-up to that story. And it took about 3 years for it to get going, but he had it translated. And he said, "We don't understand this Mexican. In Germany, we don't have that. We don't have people from Mexico. So what can you do about that?" So I made her Serbian, and I made her Catholic Serbian. But she was also a victim in the war, and then all the stuff of the war and the Yugoslav war, and came to a head and became a part of the structure and fabric of the play. And the play was produced in Germany, and it toured Germany, and I went to go see it, and it was thrilling. It was really a highlight. I went on stage and got flowers in this wonderful experience. Thank God for Canada Council, they paid for me to fly over and see it. And it was strange and interesting because I have a couple of Hitler jokes in the play, and they're actually quite funny in English. In Germany, there was one guy who laughed at both of the Hitler jokes. Like,
one guy in the whole
one guy,
audience.
that's all I heard, was one guy. I don't know if I'd want to have dinner with him, but anyway, the play did really well, and it was really thrilling to have a Jewish play touring in Germany, and and even being a little critical of German society, but mostly that's not what it was about. It was a Canadian story, and his family, and super thrilling to have a play produced internationally.
That's great. So that's when I first would have known who you were. Mind you, I went with Brad. Weirdly, Brad, you're gonna figure into this. I feel like a lot. To the opening night of this hotel. I don't think I ever got to meet you then, but I think I was your like +1 for that. Weirdly, all those like 21 years ago. And then you were swirling around Canadian stage when I was there, and Robert had read the article about there was going to be this reunion in Pontypool for the Jews, and he said, you know, maybe this is an idea for a play. And we were like, well, let's find a Jewish playwright. And I talked to Iris Turcotte, who is no longer with us, who was the dramaturge at Canadian Stage, and that's how you and I met, right? And did you think it was like, who is this crazy person coming up? But you had some connection to Peterborough. You knew Peterborough. You had been to the farm.
And I knew Rob.
Right.
We had done a show together years ago as well. And I had been out here. I did an arbor season when I met Brad Brackenridge, Sir Brad Brackenridge.
We should do a drinking game online. Beers, and every time we mention Brad, you drink.
And I saw the great Farini that year, which I was like, blew my mind. I have to say, it really did. I remember it so well, and they did this incredible stuff at the farm. Yeah, that was.
You had some context when I came and chatted you up about Pontypool.
Well, I didn't know about Pontypool per se,
yeah.
but the environs I did understand, and I also, you know, Pontypool was like a mini Catskills, and my parents had grown up in Montreal, and the Laurentians were the place where they went. There were, you know, areas where Jews could go and where Jews couldn't go. They had their enclaves, and they met there, and they partied there and danced and got up to no good, I'm sure, as well. But I had a connection to that world, not that I participated in that, but through the stories, I could equate the Laurentians with Pontypool. So I understood that story. But it's a very different story, and Pontypool is not nearly as ornate or luxurious as those hotels in Senegath were. So it had a whole other underbelly, and then I met Doris, and she
Doris Mineta.
Doris Mineta, whose family owned one of those resorts, Minetas, and she introduced me to a lot of people. And over the course of time, and Grant Curtis had written a book that I used as a lot of source material. There was a lot of stuff there for me to begin to understand the world of Pontypool, and then I ended up shaping Doris into one of the characters in the play, the lead character in the play. And
young and older version.
Young and older version. So she actually played an older narrator who gets to watch herself as a younger person, and it was very beautiful. And I was really so thrilled in the end to give that gift to Doris for what she had given to the play. And I took liberties, you know, with her character, because she ends up being someone searching for love and doesn't find it in the play. She doesn't find it in the play. She does find her dreams to be a teacher, but she doesn't find the love. And there were just some true touchstones to there, and it really, Doris was very warm and affected by it, and we bonded very much over that experience. It's really interesting. You know, I would go to the where was it? Pontypool? I don't know the Pontypool. I forget exactly. In that area, the cemetery, and I found people from that era who had served. Because I was looking for the real names. I wanted the people who had served in World War I or who had died. The same things happened in the Great Shadow, where it's played in the summer, where after the British chemical explosion, some people who died. And I have the names of the people, and it's a very small homage, and nobody will probably even know. But somehow to take that and like just let them live again somehow is very meaningful to me, and I love that we can do that and bring history to life literally.
In both of your first two shows for Fort Line, I mean, you're an urbanite. You've lived all your life in larger urban centers. And yet what you do so beautifully is you were able to my mind, capture the small town vernacular and the small town character without making it a caricature, as well as that clash of the other. So both Pontypool and the Battle of Bank Robbers and the Great Shadow have small town Ontario and then these othered people, these people from away who come there. Where does that ability to write like that? I remember the first time I read Pontypool, I was like, you really got the Goyim people there so perfectly well captured.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that really. I wish I did. I mean, I think seeing fourth line plays has certainly been helpful in that regard. And just having, I like to think I have a good ear for dialogue and I can pick up those elements. And also with the vernacular that I'm more familiar with, like Jewish culture, to find something to contrast that. When you have those things working in tandem, then it becomes clearer. The voices become clearer because they're in opposition to each other in some ways. And I think you probe and you prod and you kind of go, look, where's the music in this? And you know, I do as a dramaturge over the course of the plays that I've written for Fourth Line too, have helped to elucidate those voices. I don't. It's not like, you know, I don't know. When I write, I don't usually write with a formula. I'm not a good playwright that way. I'm not trained as a playwright. I sit down and I start to write, and I kind of commit to it. And I'm willing to throw it out or not use it, but I also just want to throw myself in and then refine and refine and refine. And it could take 3, 4 years, even longer in some circumstances to do that. But you begin to hear the people, and when you put those voices, put those characters into the minds of actors, and they bring it to life, and you begin to hear them too, you can tell what's truthful and what's not, what's real and what's not, and try to bring people to life, because I like to write in different styles, and I like to write with comedy, but I also want everything to be grounded in a reality. And even talking about The Great Shadow, it's like there are extremes to some of the characters, but I don't want them to be buffoons, I don't want them to be clowns, I want them to be I want them to be real, even in all of their grand size.
The way you describe that. Well, no, that couldn't be any truer than in the Bad Luck Bank Robbers. So there's a story about French Canadian bank robbers, small town Ontario, Havelock specifically. And what was interesting in that play, and in the reaction over 2 years to it, and that this is completely a testament to the writing, is bank tellers who were held at gunpoint, police officers who investigated, the children of the bank robbers all saw it and all loved it. And that was a play I was nervous about, right? Because I was nervous about the comedy inside of the bank robbery. And we talked about it, like the razor's edge of how much is too much. Luckily, thank God nobody was killed, but they were held at gunpoint and there was trauma, of course. But what you did so beautifully was, I think, and I'm curious what you think about it, how truthful you were and how honest and authentic and present inside of it in the writing made it, everybody could see themselves reflected truthfully.
I think I always seek the truth. Like, I'm not trying to, be, I'm not special because of that. I think I do. With that play, we went through a lot of things. It was paused, the production was paused at the time. I put it down and said, I'm not going to do this. And then I went to the Ontario Archives and I found transcript of the trial, of the actual trial, and a lot of information.
Pre-trial. Remember it was the pre-trial?
Pre-trial, yeah.
Yeah, you never found the actual trial transcript. Yeah.
And also police officer affidavits and testimonies and things like that. And you get, I don't know, I just work instinctually. I take the stuff that's interesting to me, and I find a way of getting the information across, and it goes into people's mouths. Obviously, they have to speak the text, and then I want people to have flaws. I want them to be complicated. I want them to contradict themselves, and I want them to be pursuing things that they want as well. So, and I haven't. I guess in my mind I have an idea about what the structure of that play was going to be, because it's before the bank robbery, and then they're trying to escape. It's a very simple sort of journey, but it's full of mayhem and chaos and comedy and contradictions and conflict, and all those C words. And they all seem to work and bring the story to life. As an actor, I find I just read some old notes in my archives. I'm going through some archives that I have, and one of them is it's an acting note about for auditioning for film and TV mostly. If you're not comfortable saying the words, make up your own words, because they don't care that you can memorize the words or not. They want to see the quality of the person that they want to cast in the role. And I think that it just holds true for me that like I need those people, that I need the characters to speak things that I could stomach, that I could see being actually spoken on stage. And when I believe them, then I can move forward. And again, I say I refine and refine and refine. But, I just finished a work recently, and it was 120 pages, and it was too long, and I had cut and cut and cut. I cut 30 pages out of the play, and it was amazing. And the play is so much better, I gotta tell you. By like give all those people all those truthful things to say, and then take 10% of them away, and suddenly words and ideas become so much more, so much clearer.
There, yeah. Wow. So I want to ask you about your comedy, because you're a very funny writer. You're a funny person, and I've spent lots of time with you, so we can joke, and you have a very quick wit, but where do all the jokes come from? Can you explain how you can make your characters all so funny and, yeah.
It's an old Jewish secret, and like magicians, we're not allowed to give away our secrets.
Oh my God.
Although my daughter thinks that Brad Brackenridge has is the funny one in the family.
Right, drink again.
Drink again.
Drink again.
I don't know. We joked in my family. My mother was a joker. She told terrible jokes, terrible. And my dad used to joke also. We kibitzed. That's what we would do. We kibitzed. I don't know. I wasn't a class clown, per se. My brother is very funny, intelligent humorist, and I don't know. I guess it's just I like language a lot, and I in my mind what I tend to do is I tend to dissect things or reverse things or break things apart, like with language, actual words. And I used to do that a lot when I was younger, sort of like almost in an obsessive way sometimes. And I think that finds its way into the writing. Just there's but you're also like giving a platform to talented people to bring things to life. And this thing that I shot last night, I had they kept changing the text, so I had to memorize this text for this part. I played a rabbi, just one scene in this really interesting series, and I could just do it, talk, and tell this young couple they should get married. These are all the things that they should do. Blah 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 blah. And I'm wearing a yarmulke and I have a beard and very Jewish, and it all worked. But I wanted to structure something, and I wanted to structure something so that the little thing itself was a story. And I ended up asking, because the director came to me when we were rehearsing it. She said, "Can you gesticulate more?" And so I said, "Actually, I have some business I worked out, and I need a cup of tea, and I need a biscuit." And then, oddly enough, the props person who I know is a lovely person had the same biscuits that I had practiced with at home. Because I practiced it at home, and I structured this thing so that I could do something that was going to be real, something that's going to be beautiful, and give me advice, but also had the character, let the character breathe, and I can't say he's going to be funny to you or not, but I think you kind of have to acknowledge that he's a humorous and warm character. So I don't know, a natural affinity for it, a language. Shakespeare is a great teacher too. And in the midst of drama, you want comedy. Like there is no drama without comedy, and conversely, there's no comedy without drama. So those things they work together, and they help each other. They're brother and sister.
I 100% agree. What's interesting for you just said, if you put the words into the mouths of great actors. What you do so beautifully is you give those great words, your really wonderful words, to our volunteer actors too. I mean, it's not like you're writing for Fort Mine for casts of 5 professional unionized artists,
I know, because then those plays could be remounted, and there's 45 people.
Yeah, you can never remount Fort Mine show, but there were 42 actors in Pontypool, probably 27 actors in the Bad Luck Bank Robbers. Lots of them were volunteers, and yet you write comedy for them, you write tough stuff for the volunteers too, which I really love. Can you talk about what that's like? Is there a fear to, if they can't get it right?
No, I don't think so. I think I went through a real journey with Fourth Line. When I first came and saw The Great Farini, and then I saw other shows over the years, and then when I started writing, just take me back to the question.
Yeah, no, it's about writing for the volunteers.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
My friend David Jansen came and saw the Redwood Pontypool, and his favorite part was Peter Spazov playing a character who's a farm worker, who's pretending, he's a Russian immigrant, he's pretending to be a farmer. And he said it was his favorite piece of business. And I began to understand that Fourth Line's a very special place, especially, and the reason why I write big plays is because I saw big plays. I saw Cabin Games, the Winslows of Derrybor, and kind of went like, there's a great palette here to be able to play with. And you don't think about that this is going to be spoken by a 12-year-old or by a woman with a German accent. You're writing the characters, and then when you get the volunteers, they get the parts get distributed. But I really think, aside from the very high quality of work that Fourth Line does, I also find that it's a community event. And once I started writing for them and having those people make my play come to life, like what I owe to those people is really, I could never even give them enough thanks. Because the place couldn't have been done otherwise. When Harold Green Theatre was interested in the Redwood Pontypool, we did a reading of it. I had to break it down so that 10 people could read the 75 speaking roles. But at Fourth Line, everybody could play 2 parts, except for the leads, or play 3 parts, whatever. So, I just gave over to that. I chatted to, and another director, Cynthia, is going to direct this play this year. And it's like, I don't want to be precious about it. I care about the work very much. I want it to be have a lot of integrity and be truthful and very funny. But I trust that the director is going to get those people there, and that the volunteers want to be there. And Peter Spazov, as an example, God bless him. He's talented in many ways, and what he does in terms of exploring, his artistic side that way is fantastic. And because he's committed to it, it comes to life, and it's truthful and it's beautiful, and it doesn't have to be Laurence Olivier at the National Theatre. I don't care about that. I care about people wanting to bring it to life, caring about it, and committing their summers to it. It's extraordinary, really.
170 hours to volunteer at Fourth Line as an actor. That's how much they commit. That's how many hours.
No. God bless them.
I want to ask about The Great Shadow. So this is I was trying to think if it was a dream that we went to Trenton once, and we went to the Film Society, and we did a small reminiscence, which is how many of our plays start, gathering people with an interest or a knowledge on a topic. So what would that have been, 2017?
Yeah, probably.
And so then the play was ready to do in 2020, and then of course we don't even have to talk about why. So now we're here. But how was writing The Great Shadow, which is about this Hollywood studio, or like a film studio in Trenton that attracted for a period of time some Hollywood interest, was it the same as writing Bad Luck Bank Robbers in the Redwood Pontypool, or was it different? I'm curious. And the reason I ask is because it is in the 1910s and 20s, so there's nobody alive. Like you don't have a Dorsey and edit, you don't have,
When we went to Trenton, we got some information, but we didn't get a lot of information. One thing I got was that the one guy who was convinced that the giant fire at British Chemical was arson. And so that seeded me some ideas around, because it was a major explosion. 200 buildings got destroyed. It was huge for Trenton. But it didn't have the same kind of source material. I had Grant Curtis's book, Smile, Pontypool, and World Smiles, whatever it's called, and Doris Vanetta. And then I had this trial transcript.
And Grace Barker's book,
and Grace Barker's book. Yeah, this one was good. But here I didn't. So I could have explored Bruce Bainsfeather, I think that's his name, who was the fellow who was behind Carry On Sergeant, which is a very famous Canadian film that was shot at the Trent Film Studio. Trenton Studio. I think it was like in late 20s, maybe even early 30s, just before the closing of it anyway. You can watch it online. It's called Carry On Sergeant. But The Great Shadow, which starred Tyrone Power Sr., who was Tyrone Power's father, who was a big Broadway actor and a film star as well, that was silent most of the time. I heard some stories around that stuff, but the source material is extremely limited, lots of gossip.
And you couldn't find the movie The Great Shadow.
It does. I don't know that it still exists. There was lots of stories about Canadian films that were found like up north or in a garage in Quebec or stuff like that. And I don't know really very much about the American.
But you put in some feelers.
I did as much
Both
as
American
I could.
and Canadian
I did,
feelers.
yes,
Yeah.
I did. But I didn't find that there was any. You could see stills of the movie, and they're really quite extraordinary. And but so I found out the idea of what the film is about, which is about a communist infiltration of a Canadian National Railway Union in 1917. This is an anti-Bolshevik propaganda film. Great Shadow is what it is, Canadian-made film. And so Trenton was the town, that was going to be the movie, and I struck that the town was going to be brought into the story. So I had the structure of what the story was going to be, people getting involved, and there was a love story that happened inside of it as well, which is always nice. And then there were two wonderful children, Maud Rose and Chloe Babette, and they were going to be in the play. I wrote it for my daughter and for Maud, and Kim's daughter, and then the pandemic came, and then the girls got older. And they
aged out.
They aged out.
Sorry, they're out.
And so now there's other wonderful people doing it, but it had been written with that in mind. So I had, it was more bare bones, but I was able to begin to hang flesh on it once I got those elements of the town, the studio, and the movie itself.
And what's so interesting, and I'm not giving anything away, but we've got the town, then you've got the Hollywood influence and the studio heads, and then you did this really exciting thing, I think, which is you looked at Russian politics at the time, because the Red Scare was a real thing all around the world, and even in small town Ontario, people thought communism was going to take over small town Ontario, right? So you have Lenin and Stalin as characters, and you actually have some discussion, weirdly, about Ukraine.
Yeah, and I just reread it recently, and there's some stuff that made me kind of lift my eyebrows. And also there's the Winnipeg strike is referred to, but it's 1919 as well. And just, that there was, a big Bolshevik movement in this country, and communists and workers and Jews and a lot of people advocating for a kind of change, and at least short work to that. But so there was a fear of that happening and spreading. And however, I expand upon that in the play. But reading about, when I read the play, Stalin talking about the forced famine on the Ukrainians, or there's just some things that come out, and I was like, people will think that I wrote this because of the unfortunate events.
It
that
hasn't been
now.
touched since 2019, 2020. It's really, when we were auditioning, some people.
Initially, because it was going to happen in the Trump year, right? There's election stuff, and democracy is a theme in this play as well. And I thought, at that time, Trump got elected, and I thought to myself, you can't just write plays anymore. You have to say something. Whatever my comedies were before, whatever they said, I didn't even know. But now I was writing, it was like, I have to, so democracy had to, I needed it to be an underpinning support of this structure of this play. And so communism was a counterpoint to that, and whether the Russian dossier and the Steele dossier and Putin and Trump and all that kind of Russian interference with the election, it all that's where that stuff came from. But now it just has a different resonance. 4 years passed, and there's a different world. But it still resonates in a different way, and it's thrilling that it's so.
Yeah, it's fascinating in the piece that it started out as that thing, but it's become this thing, and it's still so funny as well. And it's,
but it's weird now too, because not a lot of people here. For those of you at home, secret reveal.
Say Red Rock, you drink again.
Just the opening of the play is the workers in the Russian national anthem. These people coming together to listen to Lenin speak.
We're not giving anything else away.
No, but
this first 3 minutes.
But yeah, it's right at the opening of the play. But it scared me too, because although it's politically pertinent of the moment, it's off-putting, and it's like, do we want to hear that? And that's my heritage, because my family came from Odessa, and they were Russians. I grew up with a Russian family, and it's only after my parents had passed away, really that I understood that we were actually Ukrainians, and they were Russified because the Russians invaded. And my grandfather has a Ukrainian passport, but he grew up speaking Russian and loving and playing Russian music all his life. I just don't know how people are going to react to that stuff. I mean, there is humor inside of it too, which hopes to alleviate some of the tension. But maybe the tension is really good. It'll be an interesting and unexpected.
Yeah, it's different than it would have been in 2020 to do those scenes. Yeah, very interesting. I want to ask you about your process, Alex. Like, where do you write? Do you write on paper? Do you write on your computer? How do you research before you ever put pen to paper? Can you tell us a bit about your writing process? Or not?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. I tried to think about what I actually do. I think the best thing I just finished this play. I think they're all different. If there's source material, it's different. This one that I've written is about putting the Merchant of Venice on trial in Palestine in 1936, which is based on an actual trial, although I have not read the transcript or know any of the details of that. And but the idea was brought to me, and some ideas around what would be included in it, and I sort of just took them as the base for what I would expound upon, and introduced a whole bunch of different characters, and there's about 12 characters in the play. So things begin to reveal themselves. The first scene is the British are the occupying force, it's the Palestinian Mandate, so they're in power. So I needed a scene to show them in power. So we begin to explore that scene. So there's the High Commissioner, there's the head of security, and there's the Man Friday. And then they're welcoming these people who are reading this play to the country. They've been touring around the world. So I had the play, and I had these people instructed who were at the top of the food chain in terms of controlling Palestine, these people coming in. And so they had to meet, and I'm looking for conflict all the time. And inside of conflict, I find comedy. And it opens up. So by the end of that scene, I didn't know where I was going to go. Where they two meet, and they said we're going to do this play, Merchant of Venice, and the guys and the High Commissioner saying you can't do that. Things are very volatile here, between the Arabs and the Jews, and we have a lot of Holocaust survivors, and I don't think it's advisable. And at the time, the Merchant of Venice was like the most popular Shakespeare play that was going for the previous 100 years, and as a great comedy. And at the end of the scene, where they're arguing back and forth, the High Commissioner introduces the idea of him having to talk to the artistic director. So the following scene is the producer meeting the artistic director and talking about how they're going to do this play, which they were not supposed to do, et cetera, and other things just come up. So I find it's like the terrible, typical kind of thing, the onion layer, but you peel off one layer and there's another thing there, and you peel it off and you just go, and then finally have a whole bunch of onion all over your table. I don't know.
You're typing.
Yes.
And are characters flowing through you? I think Maya talks about that, Maya Ardle. The characters are she's a conduit. Is it like that for you?
I think so, yeah.
It is.
And I think one of the most bizarre and satisfying things about writing is I don't remember doing it a lot of the time. You go back and give yourself some space and go back and read something and go I don't know how it happened. I know I did it, but there's this feel of the distance between.
I'm looking at Lydia. Lydia's got behind the thing, but I'm thinking about when we wrote the Halloween play together. I feel like some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really quite magical. And I type usually. I write by hand. But now it's also so easy with you can Google information and just have access to so many things that you didn't before, and that opens up other stuff. In this particular play, as I was exploring stuff, I thought there were judges. I needed 3 judges in this Shakespeare play to judge the trial, to watch the trial. And I thought, who could I have as judges? And I thought, I'll pick Golda Meir and Albert Einstein and Felix Frankfurter, who was an associate justice on the Supreme Court. And they were all happened to be Jews, which I didn't know Felix Frankfurter was originally. 2 of them were German, and then this whole other German thing happens. There's a German Holocaust survivor in the play, and then there's it all kind of mixes together. So I think when you open up that territory and invite the muse in, you become the conduit for the story to be told. There is a sort of consciousness, of course, that goes with it, but I like to think that it happens at a higher level than that too. I'm just reading, I love Leonard Cohen, and I'm reading Michael Posner's books on him, and they're really quite extraordinary, all these interviews. And he, like him or not, Leonard Cohen, he exists on a mystical level. There's something he touches, and even if you don't believe it, for him, I think he believed it, and it manifested itself. I think Shakespeare existed on that level too, and other writers obviously do as well. But I like to touch that magic, and I feel like I do sometimes. Not that my work is so brilliant, I just feel like I'm invited in sometimes, and I know when I've been there, and it's a wonderful place to be.
Do you ever get writer's block?
Yeah, I don't think I suffer from it a lot. I don't want to curse myself, but generally not. There may be a problem I don't know how to solve. It takes time, but I don't know. I have characters, and I can spit them out.
Are you jumping between projects, or is it one project, then you have to get that out of the way, and then the next one? I'm so curious about that, or juggling balls.
I do juggle, but I like to finish. I like to finish so that I finish. Well, it's easy not to finish, and things take time. I have a project. Here is just an example. It's very much like Pontypool because I was just online looking at this Winnipeg Jewish Theatre, and I have an association with them, and I was doing some research. My family also, some of them on my mom's side came out west. They went to Winnipeg. So I actually have a cousin there. And I was exploring stuff, and I found this woman, Anna Feldman. And what I discovered was that Alexander Galt, who was a minister in John A. Macdonald's cabinet, wanted to bring Jews over from Eastern Europe to farm land in the prairies. And they had a program. They started to bring these people over. And there were these communities. There were these Jewish colonies of farmers, mostly in Saskatchewan, which was called Assiniboia at the time. And I don't know if were any actually in Manitoba or not, but it was just sort of open territory at the time. And I thought, oh my God, what a fascinating thing that there were farming communities of Jews coming over here. And this woman, Anna Feldman, did copious interviews with the people, the pioneers, and their children. And she archived them and gave them to the Museum of History in Ottawa, which used to be the Museum of Civilization. And they digitized a portion of them. And I called and I spoke to them, and they were like, "Oh, we're closed now," and stuff like that. But there is this portion, and they sent them to me. So I have this huge trove of these interviews with these people who came over from Eastern Europe to the prairies and lived under terrible conditions. Most of them didn't last. Some of them stayed 50 years. It was never a very successful thing. But you can go online, you can actually see like the remnants of what was there. So I have this source material, and I talked to the Winnipeg Jewish Theatre, and I said, I want to write a play about this. But he had another idea that he wants to do as well. So I have these two projects through the Winnipeg Jewish Theatre to explore. The other one just being about Jews settling. And they sort of conflate, but I don't want them to conflate. I want to find different stories. So I just want to, I want to have a structure, know what I'm going to do with each of the projects, but I don't think I want to jump in and be in the middle of two projects at the same time. I know Hannah Moskovich could do like 10 projects at the same time. It's a huge balancing act, but it's.
Well, everybody's so different, right? Like, you sound like you can. There's a couple you can flip back and forth.
Well, also it's like I'm an actor, so there's enough to do when you're fortunate enough, when you have to like audition or you're learning a part or whatever. Like, I remember doing a show at the National Arts Center. It's like for me, it's like work at the National Arts Center, how wonderful and thrilling. But it was writing a play, and I couldn't wait to get off stage and go back to my dressing room. It wasn't the lead in the play; I was a supporting role, so I could write on. It was when I was writing Yardside, because I just was coming, and it was more important to me than the other thing. But you have to make some money too. Yardside wasn't having money and stuff at that time. So yeah, when we had our theater company, Spend Your Rent Theater, I created a motto, and it was finish, complete, move forward. Because very often we think we're finished something, but it's actually not completed, and we try to move forward, and it's just not done yet. So I'd like to finish completed and move forward.
How long does it take you to write a play?
I think about 3 years. I think I could write it faster. I know Urgent Karita had said it's 3 years, and I just, there's always extenuating circumstances, and the Shakespeare thing that I've been working on has been about 3.5 years now. Pandemic is part of the reason.
But a first draft? Like 3 years first draft?
I would know when I'm talking about like a completed.
A completed play, yeah, but
Yeah.
a first draft.
I'd say less than a year. I think I
Okay.
could do it in less than a year.
Okay, interesting. And you were talking about journaling, so were you a journaling kid?
A kid, I wrote a lot of stories when I was a kid, like in elementary school. But I didn't start journaling until I was probably in my late teens or early 20s.
You have them all still?
I do.
Wow. And so, how old were you first play? Do you remember first scene you wrote?
I think it was that play, Day of Atonement.
Yeah, so in the...
She's coming home. She's coming home. It's Yom Kippur, and she's gone shopping. I don't know. She buys bananas, and the bananas get smushed, and she says, too much potassium kills. And she throws up the banana. See, that wasn't the funniest thing. Nobody laughed. So I think that was the first scene I ever wrote.
And first person you ever showed a piece of writing to?
I'm going to move beyond that play because that didn't happen. I think, I think probably, I don't know, maybe Kelly Thornton. With this hotel, she was the dramaturg. She directed the play as well, but she was the dramaturg. I had written stuff that began to become very self-indulgent, and she had trained with Iris Turcotte as a dramaturg and Brian Corey, both very gifted dramaturgs, and gave her the tools and she very much adheres to the hero's journey structure, which is like Joseph Campbell, if you know anything about him, or even basically the Star Wars story, the reluctant hero who hears the call and then he goes on the journey and he meets somebody who gives him, a step
Just
towards
before you finish this, remember this for seeing the Antipodes tonight. I have to say, put a pin in that one. Continue.
So the structure of the hero's journey, and so this hotel is structured completely on the hero's journey. And it was really great because I was like, this is good, it's a good scene or whatever. Because I was like, if it doesn't fit the criteria of these 10 points or the 14 points, whatever it is, of the hero's journey, like this scene has to correspond, this scene has to correspond. And there's a thing called Save the Cat, which is a software for writing books and films. And it's the same kind of thing. So you have to fulfill particular criteria along the way. I'm sure there's other structures you can use, but if you're going to work from a structure, the hero's journey it's basis of many fairy tales and folklore, and it served us for
Do you do it for everything? Do you use that structure?
No,
to this
I
day?
don't, but yes, I do use it. I don't use it, I think about it as I'm going through, but this hotel was the clearest example of that.
And so, what?
And Kelly, like, she wasn't indulgent of me at all. She was a hard ass about it, and good she was.
Yeah. And what kind of dramaturgy now? I mean, you're a very established playwright. What kind of dramaturgy works for you now? That's such a weird relationship, working with a dramaturg or a literary manager. What helps you? What is the best for you?
I don't know. I don't want to be precious with my work, so I want to be able to hear if there's somebody who I trust, who I'm working with, what they believe, what they don't believe. Again, going back to the Shakespeare play, my agent and the director of the project is also a dramaturg and a playwright as well. She's a very established American woman, and has been a really good guide. And I have this thing, I think I have it as an actor and as a writer, where I'm looking for a parental figure. I want to please my director. I want to please my dramaturg. It doesn't mean I want to kowtow to them and I can argue and disagree, but ultimately I want the approval. Somehow I want the approval. So I'm open to receiving the comments from a peer that I respect. I talked with Peter Hinton yesterday, or talked with Kerry Perloff, and the things I don't agree with, I'm not worried about. And the things that I do agree with, there was a scene in this play, the Shakespeare play, we wanted to get to the trial. The play is tentatively called The Trial of William Shakespeare. The audience is going to expect in the second act to get to the trial of the play. But I had all this other stuff. It was really great stuff, really super dialogue, lots of funny stuff, and some Jewish elements and stuff, but it wasn't serving the play. And she kept saying to me, the director, we want to get to the trial. And I was like, just let me keep this part. And finally, when I took it away, I needed something to introduce another character. I got rid of that whole first half. I got to the trial much sooner. I introduced Albert Einstein on the way to the trial instead of a backstage scene at the trial. It was facilitating the narrative much more quickly, and we met the character, and we got on the journey. So I recognize her insight in that, and dramatically speaking, or even what Cynthia did with how I changed the ending of the first act of The Great Shadow. There was a scene where they're filming, and then there was this couple who comes to visit Trenton, and then they're filming again. And the director wisely suggested that the scene where the people come to visit maybe should not be there and start the second act, so that the filming could be continuous. We don't have to get everybody off stage, bring on these two people, get those two people off stage, and bring everybody back on. So it facilitated the play better, and I recognized that, and I thought it was a good idea. So I'm open to those things. I want to work with somebody to make the play better.
We have a few more minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, you've done 3 projects now with James Kadalka, former assistant director of the National Ballet, a renowned choreographer, and you are writing, like, against the grain. I think I've seen a couple of these projects, but tell me about the writing for these are dance operas.
I call them theatricals. They're dance operas. They are. We did 2 of them. I wrote another opera previously to that. And we just did this 3rd project, which is based on an H.G. Wells short story. No, not H.G. Wells. Who wrote Howard's End? Who wrote Howard's End?
E.M. Forster?
E.M. Forster wrote the science fiction story in 1912 about the people who live underground in these isolated communities, and the machine runs everything. The story's called The Machine Stops. And anyway, we were exploring that story, and science fiction at that time was really interesting. The ideas of science fiction in that era, bringing that to life. The weird thing was that we ended up all being in these separate bubbles, and so when I was writing the libretto, that particular one was a little bit different, and it wasn't quite as. It was a little bit more verbose, like. There was rhythm and language and musical elements to it, but I always think of a libretto as a poetic drama. That it has to have the brevity of poetry, but it also has to be. I'm a big narrative fan, so it has to fulfill those 2 criteria. But like Samuel Beckett, you want to do it with the least amount of words necessary. Use what you need. So I've written poetry since I was young, so. I have that poetic element that feeds me, and again, it can be indulgent. You want to facilitate the story. Working with James was great. He had conceived of these ideas. We did The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton, and Against the Grain, which is by Carl Wiesman. Both interesting, peculiar stories. The Edith Wharton less so, more quite a famous book. But what he brought to me was the idea that I could leave space for dance to tell the story by taking words away, creating a context for something that's physically expressed, and then supporting it with language or supporting it with music. And they were great. We did it with what used to be the Coleman Lemieux Dance Company, which is now the Citadel Company, Laurence Lemieux. And I don't know if this 3rd one's going to go or not now. It's sort of to the side now. And James is no longer the dancer in residence there.
So wait, do you write an entire libretto, and then he puts dance in, or does he tell you kind of what he's imagining for the choreography, and then you write around it?
They've all been different, and the music for this one is being done by John Zowski.
Oh, okay.
And it was just kind of different because the other one was James Rolfe, who was very musical, and Rodney Sharman, who's a bit more modernist. But they work really well, and I like songs. I like things to have tunes. I don't like them to be like sharp and. They can be fine sometimes too, but I like to be able to hum something. I just do. First time when I was working with Rodney's he's a purist, and he was like, "Who is this guy?" And I'd written a full opera, the tapestry opera to produce, but he didn't know me, and he was trying to teach me about all the things I needed to do, and he had a lot of time on his hands, and he would like pick on every little detail. I was like, making me kind of crazy. And then he got busy, and I wrote the second act, and he had nothing to say about it. And then he was behind on his music actually, and we actually started rehearsing that show as the music was still coming in. We were already in rehearsal waiting to see how it completed. But so leaving the space for the dance was a really interesting concept of how the movement could tell the story and leave space for that. I love words, and even when I'm working with Omar Daniel, we did this opera called The Shadow.
I'm going to ask you about The Shadow, yeah.
Which was for Tapestry, which is a really interesting story. I loved it so much. But I just don't want them. I know the composers usually end up being the stars of opera, but I want to hear the story. I don't want the music to take the words away. I think Stephen Sondheim would fully agree too. It's like
he's dead.
I know, but he would if he was alive. Because they're so brilliant. His words are so brilliant, and his music is too, no question. But they have to work in tandem. Because sometimes you're like, what'd she say?
I know. Well, I've always said what's so brilliant about Sondheim is every single song is a monologue. To me, that's how you have to
That's
approach.
well said. Yeah.
They are monologues that have to be delved into in the same way you would.
Yeah.
Extraordinary music with them. Yeah, no, The Shadow was great. I loved it. And I loved Against the Grain, and I loved Hudson Mark too. The beautiful combo in those ones.
And they were intimate. He wanted, because he had run the National Ballet.
I guess the room was kind of this size.
Yeah, not much bigger.
Yeah.
Because there were in the first one there were 4 couples that danced, and the men were opera singers. The women were dancers. The women didn't sing. Only the men sang. The men who had never danced before were all dancing with the women, who were all accomplished dancers. And there was a 5-piece orchestra in this small space. So, like in terms of like the intimacy of it and feeling right there, we took it to someone's home. We did it in a mansion in Forest Hill. It was really quite amazing that we could do that. Cause like a soiree in someone's home, the way that it would have done 100 years ago.
So you're going to be around much this summer?
I hope so. I want to come out for the opening of rehearsrsals, and then I want to come back for the dress rehearsals and previews and opening of the show. It's really important to me. It's like I was living out west now, and with film and TV, which it's like that's the weird thing as an actor. It's a mug's game, because it's like, are you going to get it or you're not going to get it, and you don't control when it gets done. So
and their timelines are really short. Like theater can be planned for 5 years, and then 3 days before you're supposed to go somewhere, you could to work and write it. You could get a big film or television.
Totally, but also the project that I did yesterday was supposed to be 3 days, and then suddenly it's 1 day, and I booked time off, and it's the incredible shrinking part, but you don't control any of that stuff. You just kind of have to go. And the money's good, generally speaking, when you work in film and TV. So you want to be open to that, and I'm touching the roots of a new community, and I don't want to just take off. Even taking theater now, it's like, how do I balance that? I want to try to work inside the framework of time when there's not a lot of film going on, and we'll see what happens. So far I've booked nothing this year. So it's been pretty grim. I've had how about that?
You booked nothing this year?
Well, I just mean since Christmas, the auditions that I've had.
Oh, okay, but you were
Yeah,
just in
but
Vancouver. You did a play. You just did 2 TV series.
Yeah, but that was it's only the one this year.
Okay.
So far.
Well, thanks so much for spending time with me. I want to see if anybody has any questions before I let you go on to the rest of your 36-hour Ontario sojourn. It was so great to sit and chat with you. It's always a pleasure. You brought so much to the stories that you have created for Fourth Line.
Well,
So
I'm
grateful.
indebted to you and to Rob as well and to the audiences just for coming out. To all you people out there in internet land too. I love doing it. I love doing it, and I'm so thrilled that the work is going to get a chance to be seen and shared. And the last time we did the Bad Life Bank Robbers, just listening to people in the house and the laughter and having them follow the story, it's so satisfying. And I think my greatest love of the theater is to sit there as a writer and not have to do anything. Let other people finally do it. Just sit there and enjoy it and listen to the people.
Well, everybody does enjoy your work. So thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Alex before we sign off and let you go? And it's okay if you don't.
I'll ask one. I've been listening to some podcasts, and this guy interviews people that work in a big theater down in the States, and he always asks the question, what does theater mean to you? So I hope that's not too open-ended.
That's a little tiny question.
Yeah, no, it's, you always want to sound intelligent with these kind of questions too. What does it mean to me? I guess, I work in different capacities. Like as a writer, I direct as well, I teach as well, I do private coaching, and I act both in theater and film. I love it, and I don't know, it's, I think I may not be the bravest person in the world, but I know I have to be brave to go on stage. And the fact that I do that makes me feel confident that I can do it. And that gives me power. It gives me personal power. I like the community of it. I love language. I love to tell stories. I think that there's so many people in the craft that I admire and have been influenced and inspired by. I was thinking earlier today on my way here, when we did Bad Life Bank Robbers, and it was so funny. The people were so good. The production was so great, and people would laugh. And I just was imagining people going home and talking about it. Because you don't get to see that. You can come and chat with it, but hundreds of people, thousands of people see the show. They go home and they talk about it, and they have their own. And I don't control any of that stuff. I give them this water, and they go home, they drink it, and they share it, and they talk about it, they store it, whatever. It's something that I give to them that takes on something else, that gives them humor or a memory or a bonding experience with somebody or a love of something that they hadn't, because a lot of people don't go to theater in the first experience that way. So I think the way I want to answer your question is as a writer, and I want to say it's that I can give a gift to the audience that can fulfill them their entire lives. I remember moments in plays that I saw that have thrilled me and inspired me, and so if I can do that, or even to something like Doris Minetta is a great example, to touch somebody's life like that is a thrill, and I value it. I value that spiritual element to the experience and the mystical thing. I think even as I get older, I embrace it more.
Thanks for the answer.
Yeah.
It's inspiring for me too.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
I'm curious from a non-play point of view, what attracted you to go to Winnipeg? Winnipeg has the most severe summers, most severe population of mosquitoes, most severe floods, and the most severe
Winters.
winters.
Yes.
It's a city of severes.
You fit right in.
What attracts people to go there?
The pierogies.
The pierogies, he said. The pierogies.
Leonard Cohen once said, why did he live in Los Angeles is because he was a poet, and there were floods and forest fires and earthquakes, and where else should he be except where everything's actually happening? the mosquitoes have been much better in Winnipeg. The winter was terrible and long, so long. It's just ending now this weekend. There's great cultural community, and I've got to meet, people and work with people that I hadn't before who are making their lives there. And I come from Montreal too, and there's a theater culture in Montreal too. It's much smaller, but I admire the people who stay there and have the tenacity to keep at it. And they work in film, television, they write it, whatever they do beyond that. But they're committed to it, and their communities. And I think in Toronto, it's a bigger community, and it's a bit of a different thing. In Winnipeg, it's much more personal. And I think I'm still learning in the same way my relationship with the Fourth Line has made me aware about the value of the people who create and who support the arts. I feel I'm getting to know them better, and I value what they bring to me in my life.
All right, well, I'm going to say thanks, and I'm going to let you go, everyone. Alex Poch-Goldin. Tickets are on sale for Great Shadow.
Come on down.
Yeah, so you can book them online, or you can call our box office, and we hope to see you all there in just a few short weeks.
Fun for the whole family.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.